Officer, I don't even know where to start. It's been almost a year since I last visited my grandparents' house in this town. You know, the one on the outskirts, near that local preserve we used to hike in during our school days. Yeah, that place. It's a spot filled with memories, both good and a bit spooky, considering the old, rotting houses and all. It was a haven for us, a place to hang out, talk about our futures, and, I'll admit it, indulge in a little drinking and smoking. So, a few days ago, I came back to town, and the nostalgia hit me hard. I thought, why not relive those days and hike with my friends at that same spot? We used to have such a blast there. We had our roles assigned already. I was responsible for the tents, Josh for firewood, Steve for beef and snacks, Jonathan for beer, and Andrew, well, he had his father's pickup truck. The plan was to park the truck in the woods and start our hike from there. Everything was going according to plan until that day. I arrived at the spot right on time, but oddly, no one else was there. I tried calling Andrew, and he told me they were going to be late because the truck's engine was overheating. He suggested I either wait for them or head into the woods alone since I knew the place well. I chose the latter, thinking I could set up the tents before they arrived. I didn't waste any time and ventured into the woods on my own. Everything seemed fine, and I reached our usual spot. But then, things took a turn. While setting up the camp, I started hearing something. The sound of someone running and breaking branches, like they were in a hurry. I immediately thought about packing up and heading back home. Just as I was about to do that, my friends finally arrived. I told them about the strange sounds I had heard, and we decided to explore the area together, thinking it might be an animal or something. We walked deeper into the woods, and that's when we stumbled upon that room. It was oddly intact, unlike the other rundown buildings nearby. But as we got closer, a horrendous odor filled the air, so foul it could make anyone gag. The room's door was tightly locked with a brand new lock, which struck us as extremely unusual. We decided to go around to the window, and there were shattered glass pieces everywhere. The stench grew stronger, and our fear intensified. Still, we decided to enter the room with our phone flashlights. What we found inside was straight out of a slasher horror movie. There were various whips, surgical tools, blades, daggers, guns, and different types of ropes, all rusted and in deplorable condition. It was like a nightmare come to life. But that wasn't the worst part. We found a staircase leading to the basement. And in the basement, there were 4 ropes tied to a wall, with the other ends cut. There was a little food in the corner, inside a dog food bowl, and a small bowl of water. The food was rotting, infested with maggots. We couldn't even begin to fathom what unspeakable horrors might have occurred there. We ran as fast as our legs could carry us, trembling and screaming in fear. We didn't look back until we reached the road where the pickup truck was parked. We didn't even think twice about leaving all our belongings behind. We just needed to get away from that place, to safety. Now, here I am, at the police station, giving you this statement. Officer, my mind is racing with thoughts. I can't help but wonder if that person we stumbled upon in that room could be Emily, the 19-year-old girl who went missing last year. The officer I asked earlier didn't answer me, and it's been gnawing at me since. I know it might sound crazy, but the timing, the circumstances, they all seem to point in that direction. It's like a nightmare that's come back to haunt us. I need to know, officer, if what I'm thinking is even remotely possible. Did we stumble upon something connected to Emily's disappearance? Is it possible that the room we found was where she was kept? I'm scared and confused, and I need answers. Please tell me what you can find out. I've always been one for adventure. Since I was a kid, I had this unstoppable craving to explore new things, even if it meant getting a scolding from the grown-ups. So, when I decided to rent a place in a not-so-developed neighborhood, no one was really surprised. But little did I know, this decision would lead to one creepy and seriously scary experience. Picture this, it was a regular Saturday evening, and I got out of college early for once. My friends were all hyped about going to the movies that night, but I had a different plan. I decided to go solo on a hike in the forest right behind my backyard. I'd never done that before, and I'll admit, I was kinda nervous. Going into the woods alone gave me the creeps, but my adventurous spirit just couldn't resist. So, when I got back home, I decided to turn it into a real adventure. Packed up some basics, a tent, some grub, and a flashlight, and off I went. I had this weird gut feeling that things might get strange, but my excitement overruled the fear. The initial part of the hike was a blast. The fresh air, the rustling leaves, and the calming sounds of nature made me feel alive. I picked a cozy spot to set up my tent, hoping for a peaceful night beneath the stars. But that's when things got seriously weird. As nightfall crept in, I thought it was a good idea to gather some firewood. And that's when I stumbled upon something that sent chills down my spine. On the ground were shreds of clothing, all torn up. There were women's underwear, a ripped red or maybe orange dress, and random pieces of black fabric. I'm telling you, my heart went into overdrive as I tried to make sense of this creepy discovery. I knew I had to get out of there, and fast. So, I rushed back to my tent, planning to pack up and hit the road. But before I could even get started, out of nowhere, a woman with blonde hair appeared right in front of me. Tears streamed down her face, and in the blink of an eye, she was inches from my nose. I was frozen stiff, sheer shock locking me in place. She begged for help, words tumbling out in a rush. She said some guy was after her, and she'd somehow escaped. Believe it or not, calling 911 didn't even cross my mind. Instead, I grabbed a wooden stick, my heart pounding like crazy, and followed the direction she pointed. I plunged deeper into the thick forest, and everything got eerily silent, like the woods were holding their breath, waiting for something to go down. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong. But then, just as fast as she'd shown up, the blonde woman vanished into thin air. It was like she'd never been there at all. Panic washed over me, and I turned to head back to my tent. But guess what? It was gone. My campsite, my stuff, it had all disappeared without a trace. There I was, standing in the pitch-black darkness, heart-pounding, and realizing that whatever had just happened made no sense. It was like I'd walked right into a nightmare, one I couldn't wake up from. I stumbled my way back home, my mind spinning with confusion and fear. I never talked about that night with anyone, 'cause who'd believe me? To this day, I can't figure out what went down in those woods behind my backyard. It's a memory I'd love to erase, but it sticks around like a ghost in the shadows, a constant reminder of that freaky and terrifying experience that shook me to my core.
My name's Charlotte, and I'm a 30-year-old woman who had a seriously creepy experience while hiking the Larapinta Trail up in Australia's Northern Territory. I'd never forget that night, and I wouldn't wish it on anyone. So, here's the deal, my friend had suggested I try hiking the Larapinta Trail. They made it sound like this epic adventure with stunning scenery and a chance to get away from it all. I packed up for a 25-day journey, expecting to have the time of my life. But here's where things got strange. There were hardly any other hikers around, and I ended up alone on this long trail. It was kinda nice at first, you know, enjoying the peacefulness of nature. But as days turned into nights, it started to feel weird being all by myself. One night, while I was chilling in my tent, I heard this bone-chilling cry. It was a woman's cry, coming from deep in the woods. My heart was pounding like crazy as I lay there in my sleeping bag. I couldn't just ignore it. What if someone needed help? So, I unzipped my tent and grabbed my trusty Samsung Galaxy S23 Ultra to use as a flashlight. Is someone there? I called out, my voice trembling like a leaf. But the cries didn't stop, they just kept going. Then, out of nowhere, they went quiet, and all I could hear were the sounds of the nighttime animals. It was as if the forest had swallowed up that woman's cries, leaving me feeling super uneasy. I hightailed it back into my tent and zipped it up tight. My heart was racing, and I was sweating bullets. I called the police with my shaky fingers, telling them where I was and what I'd heard. But, being so far out on the trail, it was gonna take them a while to get to me. Sitting there in my tent, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was really wrong. And then I heard it, footsteps coming closer to my tent. I held my breath, praying that whoever it was wouldn't notice me. The night dragged on, and it got colder and darker. I could hear people talking in a language I couldn't understand, but I could make out the word, tent. My heart was pounding even harder, and the woman's cries started up again, even scarier this time. I didn't sleep at all that night, just sitting there in fear. When the morning finally came, I felt a huge sense of relief as I heard sirens getting closer. The police had arrived, and I told them everything that had happened. I shared my story with my friend who had suggested this hike to me. They were as shocked as I was and understood why I'd developed a fear of hiking since that night. We both shuddered at the thought of what might have happened if I'd gone into the woods to investigate. This whole thing messed me up big time. I can't help but think about that woman, the voices in the night, and those footsteps near my tent. Sometimes, I wonder what might have happened if I'd been braver or stupider and gone looking for her. It's a memory I wish I could erase, but it's stuck with me like a dark cloud hanging over my head.